Hello and welcome to the Ruslan Belov channel. Trump made a statement. Everyone expected something threatening, powerful, fearsome. In the end, tariffs will be introduced, but in 50 days. And well, in 50 days, they could just delay it another 50 days. Meanwhile, the Patriots will send weapons to Kiev. That's it. The fighting continues, and we continue analyzing the frontline situation. Let's move to the map. And before we begin, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. It helps the channel grow. Thank you to those who've already subscribed. So this update will be very interesting. The most important part is, of course, the incredible breakthrough by the center group of forces. A 6-kilometer advance, which means that the encirclement of Pokrovsk is no longer theoretical. It's happening in practice. But let's go in order. I strongly recommend watching this video to the very end. There will be lots of interesting details. Let's start traditionally with the Sumy region, where there's also been progress. Over the past day, Russian forces managed to advance in Mirnograd, quite significantly actually. As you can see, the advance wasn't just across open fields, but inside the residential area of the village, which is much harder. Nonetheless, Russian troops managed to push forward almost a kilometer, 980 meters to be exact. The advance followed Sumskaya Street. As a result, the western part of Mirnograd is now almost entirely under Russian control. If we look at the grey zone on the map, things look quite grim for the Ukrainian side. So what do we see? In Mirnograd, the AFU only controls a couple of streets on the southern outskirts. That's it. The fighting here is intense. The AFU is literally throwing waves of infantry into the fray. Let's move on. No changes were reported in the Kharkiv region over the past 24 hours. No advances there. But in the Constantinovka direction, things are different. Progress was made on 3 separate fronts. The first is between Dilayevka, both Bolshaya, Upper, and Malaya, Lower Dilayevka. There was a pocket between them. Now it has been cleared. The advance was 3.3 kilometers deep, and 5.5 square kilometers of territory came under Russian control. The key point here is that the front line is now straightened, allowing a smooth path toward Alexander Shultin. From these positions, it's less than 3 kilometers to the last Ukrainian stronghold before Constantinovka. Although the next step might be to clear out another pocket first, and then push toward Alexander Shultin. We'll keep an eye on it. There were also notable gains near Touretsk in the urban settlement of Petrovka. By the way, this Petrovka-Sherbinovka zone is what's preventing the full closure of the Touretsk question and the launch of a large-scale move toward Constantinovka. It's tough here, but despite that, as you can see, there is still progress. This time, Russian troops advanced 780 meters through residential areas. More than half of Petrovka is now under full Russian control. But as I said earlier, the most significant breakthroughs occurred in the east. Before we move to the collapse of the AFU defenses near Mirnograd, let me mention another important success in the Konstantinovka direction, in one of the last southern defensive strongholds in Yablonevka. Remember, on July 9th, the AFU counterattacked in Yablonevka and managed to push Russian troops back by 400 meters. But as often happens with the AFU, they pushed, and that was it. A few days passed, and their entire powerful counterattack was rolled back. Over the past day, Russian troops not only regained those 400 meters, but also broke into the center of the defensive node. The advance in the residential area was a massive 2 kilometers. As a result, half of Yablonevka is now under Russian control. And as I've shown before, once Yablonevka and Alexander Kalinova are taken, the road to Konstantinovka from the south is open. But honestly, that might be the least of the AFU's problems, given how things are collapsing on the eastern flank of Mirnograd. Just take a look. Let's break down what happened and what this means for the AFU. First, over the past day, Russian forces managed to enter the urban settlement of Novaya Ekonomichnaya from the north. From the south, Russian troops had already taken part of the settlement. Yesterday, they advanced another 500 meters within the settlement itself, along Touretskaya and Zarekhnaya streets. They not only advanced, but managed to secure and take control of parts of those streets. This means the AFU garrison in Novaya Ekonomichnaya is now under pressure from both the north and the south. Given the problems to the north, I don't think they'll be able to hold out here for long, and this settlement is the last line of defense for Mirnograd from the east. Losing it will seriously weaken the city's defense, but that's not even the main thing. What happened just north of Novaya Ekonomichnaya was completely unexpected, judging by the shock among Ukrainian military analysts yesterday. The center group of Russian forces launched a powerful push and penetrated the AFU defenses by 4 to 6 kilometers. Thanks to that push, they effectively reached the outskirts of Krasny Liman village, just 800 meters away. And Rodinskoye is only 2.5 kilometers from the current positions. But here's what's even more important. Not just the fact that Russian troops are approaching another town, which no one would have imagined even a month ago, but the fact that logistics from the north of the whole agglomeration are now cut off. Look at this railway and highway. These were the main supply routes for the AFU garrison. Now Russian troops are within 5 kilometers of those routes. That means drones will be able to strike anything moving along them. This won't just be a road of death, it'll be a road of total destruction. Supplying anything along that route will become impossible. And that's probably the main result of yesterday's breakthrough. Also take a look at how bad things are now for Mirnograd. It's currently encircled from 3 sides. Something serious is about to happen here. The only question is whether the Russian army will storm Rodinskoye. Again, just 2.5 kilometers away. I don't think they will. Yes, it's a small town with a population of 10,000 and not very large in area. Some villages are physically bigger. But the problem is that it's full of high-rise buildings. As you can see, it's packed with apartment blocks. That could result in a prolonged urban battle. It would make more sense to bypass it from the north, which is what's happening now. Another advance yesterday, 3 kilometers, brought Russian troops right up to Fedorovka. That was the goal. And not only did they reach it, they entered the village and took control of its eastern part. After Fedorovka, there's just one more village, and that's it. The logistics for Pokrovsk, Mirnograd and Rodinskoye are completely cut. Rodinskoye itself will then be encircled from the north. What can I say? It's a brilliant operation. If the western flank now also makes a push toward Grishino, then it's truly over for the AFU in this area. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention. Over the past 24 hours, the village of Razino also came under full Russian control. Like I said, it's total collapse. Another disaster. Zelensky will now be throwing tantrums and demanding reinforcements for this area. But where will he get them from? The AFU has problems not just here, but in Zaporizhzhia too. The Vostok group of forces managed to finally push the AFU out of Malinovka. The battle for this large village was long and fierce, and is now over. And now, what can we say? Thanks to the capture of the village, it's now possible to begin moving along this road toward the city of Gulyapol, although in order to fully neutralize the threat of counterattacks, which will certainly come, the guys might first decide to move north and take Poltavka as well. Because as you can see, these villages are essentially interconnected. If you take Malinovka but don't advance north and instead continue west, then counterattacks will come from Poltavka. As a result, your positions in Malinovka will never be stable. To secure and stabilize them, you must take Poltavka. There was also progress yesterday in Kamenskoye. Russian forces advanced 1.3 kilometers in the northern part of the village and essentially reached the northern outskirts. So practically the entire village, at least 95%, is under full Russian control. Part of Zavodskaya Street was recaptured with a 204-meter advance. And that was the only Ukrainian advance across the entire front for the day. The area of their advance over the past day was 0.05 square kilometers. Meanwhile, Russian forces advanced by 31.5 square kilometers in a single day. And this is the third day in a row that we're seeing such strong results. Over 20 square kilometers of gains per day. It looks like a very good pace has been reached. Well, that's all I have for today regarding the front line. Now let me briefly share a few political updates. Germany has rejected Ukraine's repeated request for delivery of Taurus cruise missiles. In addition, Ukraine will not receive any additional Patriot systems because Germany has only 6 systems left at its disposal. As German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius emphasized, that's too few, especially given NATO obligations. Trump made a number of statements about the Ukrainian crisis. He said he was very unhappy with Russia and intends to impose tough tariffs if no deal is reached on Ukraine within 50 days. The rate of secondary tariffs in the absence of progress on resolving the Ukraine conflict would be around 100%. He also announced that 17 Patriot systems would be delivered to Ukraine. The US president stated that the US and EU have agreed to supply weapons to Kiev, but Europe will bear the costs. "We're not going to pay for it," he said. "We will manufacture it, but they will pay for the weapons." He said their last meeting a month ago was very successful, in that Europe agreed to contribute 5%, over $1 trillion per year. They have a lot of money. These are rich countries, and they want to be involved. They are deeply concerned about this, and we are too, Trump added. American arms deliveries to Ukraine will be coordinated by NATO and US representative to the alliance Matthew Whitaker. When asked how far he was willing to go in the event of an escalation in Ukraine, Trump said he was committed to a settlement. He also said that Russia has incredible potential, including in trade, and that conversations with Putin happen often. "These talks are always very pleasant," Trump said. "But Putin has fooled many people: Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. He won't fool me." According to Federation Council Deputy Speaker Kosachev, Trump's statements regarding Ukraine will not impact the mood in the Russian Federation. And in 50 days, Kosachev added, a lot could change, on the battlefield, and in the mood of the US and NATO. Our source reports that Trump intends to sell weapons to the EU for Ukraine because it's good business, especially since weapons prices have risen, up 15% overall, and air defense systems by 50% compared to summer 2024. The price increase, according to the Legitimacy Telegram channel, is due to the 12-day war. Back in March, we reported that Trump would not miss the opportunity to profit off the Ukrainian crisis, especially since this would further weaken Europe's business elite and worsen the EU's socio-economic situation. An interesting note from the source: weapons prices are now at record highs because of extreme shortages. For example, ordering a Patriot air defense system will cost just over $1 billion, but delivery would take 3 to 5 years. Buying one right now costs $1.6 to $2 billion. That's why some countries are selling their own systems to Ukraine. They're just making money on it. And on top of that, it's a perfect corruption track. Kickbacks on these deals run into the tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars. All military procurement is controlled by Yermak, his brother, and fixers who've already made billions. We've reported before on the schemes involving ammo purchases. Yermak is also credited with creating the Ukrainian military-industrial complex myth, a scheme sold to European sponsors as a form of domestic growth. But in fact, it's a case of personal enrichment, with hundreds of millions of euros in kickbacks, writes Legitimacy. Washington can't strike Russia directly, the risk is too high. So the White House threatens India and China, hoping to sever their ties with Moscow. But even Western experts warn that such steps will hurt the US itself the most. America cannot break Russia directly, and it acknowledges that, if not with words, then with actions. So now Washington's main pressure is aimed at those who maintain ties with Moscow, first and foremost, China and India. But even that strategy is dangerous, for the US political analyst Yuri Svetov notes that Trump's method is not action, it's intimidation. He negotiates through threats, raises the stakes, and says things like, "I'll do this." The idea is that you'll get scared, come running to make peace, and then he'll bargain from there. Strong players, especially China and Russia, don't fall for this. China imposed tough retaliatory measures after Washington announced tariff hikes, and the US backed down. Trump had promised hundreds of % tariffs on Chinese goods, but after China struck back and cut off certain raw material exports, Washington folded. With Russia, it's even harder. Economic pressure is nearly impossible, the expert notes. It's very hard to influence Russia because we barely trade with the Americans, and what they do buy from us, rare earth metals, titanium, uranium, they desperately need. Several times, brave senators proposed cutting trade ties, but business leaders pushed back. How are we supposed to produce without those resources? So the government backed off. That's why the US targets not Russia, but those who cooperate with Russia or refuse to support Ukraine. This is exactly what Senator Lindsey Graham proposed, who, by the way, has been declared a terrorist and extremist in Russia. Lindsey Graham suggests 500% tariffs, not against Russia, but against countries that help Russia and don't help Ukraine. That means primarily India and China, but even here, the Americans are limited. Their own economists warn that such tariffs would devastate the US economy. Passing such tariffs would inflict huge damage on the United States itself. So for now, they're just trying to intimidate. As for threats to confiscate frozen Russian assets, experts say Washington's hands are tied. They would have done it already, if not for the potential blowback. So in the end, all they have are scare tactics, which Russia is not going to respond to. The entire US strategy boils down to a single goal: prolong the conflict without spending their own money. Let others pay. The main objective is to weaken Russia and prevent its rapprochement with China. That's all for now, friends. Thank you for watching and staying informed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. It really helps the channel grow. See you in the next update. Take care and stay safe.